Okay. All right. Good evening. It's April 22nd. This is the Norfolk Advisory Committee meeting. We'll do a quick introduction of the members, and then we'll jump into the agenda. So,
Rick Stillman.
Arlie Sterling.
Dave Benton.
Arthur Franzak.
Pat Sneed.
All right. So our agenda tonight is we need to review the warrant and vote on various articles. We probably will have, we've discussed almost all. We have some guests that I think I know what they want to talk about, the turf field articles, so we'll spend some time on that. We'll probably do that first. We've also got a first pass of the sewer department enterprise fund, but the selectmen aren't voting it until next Wednesday, but we can, at least we can decide whether we want to, we think we know where it's going to come out. And then we've got some minutes to approve and a reserve fund request.
Oh,
All right, which is actually a part two to one that we earlier approved, so should be relatively straightforward. All right, but I think what we'll do, I was planning just to go through the article one by one, but since we've got some esteemed guests from various parts of the King Philip community, we will discuss the article, what is labeled Article 17, which is the turf field request. And so as a little background, we had a bit of a discussion last week at the meeting, and where we had initially come out in our discussion was we were going to recommend that Norfolk, we approve up to $150,000 as our portion. The expectation is that the project itself is about $1 million. The Field Turf Committee has raised $400,000, and they would like the three towns to come up with the remaining $600,000. And since we're roughly 1/3, that would leave us with $200,000. So what our discussion had centered around was that we'd be willing to contribute $150,000 with an expectation which would be $450,000 and leave about $150,000 if the other towns participate at the same level. And then the King Philip, the regional district, would contribute the remaining $150,000 from E&D. So that was where we had kind of left it. Since then, there's been some discussions, and we've got various guests, which we'd love to get your input. I think in looking at where we stand, I think there's been some, Jim, come right in. And I think we'd like to let's open the discussion with conceptually the 150 versus 200. I think beyond the first point, I think we're all supportive of the concept, and it's a matter of, what's the most appropriate funding mechanism or approach that we'd like to take. I don't know if anybody has some opening. Pat, I know you've had some.
Yeah, let me start,
Yes.
because I've been involved in this, although not from the beginning.
And unfortunately, you weren't here last week, Pat, and that was...
along with, I might add, Jack also.
Yes.
We were both ad hoc members of the Turf Committee for a while and attended several of the meetings. The idea here was that we've been raising funds for several years. 400,000, things are starting to dry up. And the realization was we're not going to get there. And oddly enough, it was Jack who came up with the idea of the towns kicking in money to bridge the gap. So we just carried that forward. I have not had any direct conversation with the selectmen, but Jack has, to my knowledge. They're on board with this. The school committee can speak for themselves, but they have been not supportive of this because they're worried about potential effects on future negotiations when it comes to the budget. That is, that if we give them this, that will prejudice future budget negotiations somehow. Personally, I feel that is without merit and is not respectful, particularly of the motives of those who've been involved in this project, because it has been, at least in my discussions with Norfolk, clear that this is just something that we would like to see done and that the town is willing to pay its part of it. The exact amount will be the $600,000 prorated in the same way that the town share of the KP budget is. In round numbers, that's 200 grand, but I don't know that we have any. I think the number's been calculated, but I don't know exactly what it is. It is a coordinated effort with Rentham and with Plainville. We each have our slice of the pie. We each have comparable articles. The issue of where the money comes from is left to each town. The anticipation here, I think, is we will bond it, pay for it over 3 or 4 years or whatever it is, and the other towns will do whatever they do, but we each have our slice. If we start looking to the school committee to come up with some of this money out of whatever pot, then that in effect fulfills exactly their concerns in the first place, that this will be somehow left-hand, right-hand kind of a thing. It was not the intention of anyone that I've known of that has been in this process. And I think that to do that will to be seriously jeopardize the prospects of this actually happening, if for no other reason than it'll put us out of sync with the other towns who already are in their process, and now suddenly they have to do an about face to match what we're doing. So mechanically it's difficult, and conceptually I think it's just plain wrong, because it's just not the intent of where we are going. And I think will be ultimately more detrimental than helpful, because it puts on the table exactly the cards we didn't want to put on the table, which is this notion of a trade. The school needs this. It's insanity that was not put in the first place. We have an opportunity now. $400,000 has been raised. If we wait too long, that support is going to fade away. A lot of that money's pledged. It's not actually in the bank. People will move. People get older. They have college. Their kid who was in high school is now in college, and all of a sudden they got tuition. That pledge doesn't look like such a good thing. So if we don't do this now, or close to now, there's a high probability that the prospects will deteriorate, not appreciate. So my belief is we should stay on track with what was proposed in the first place. Our number is about 200 grand. Let's do it. Over 4 years, the difference between 150 and 200 is purely symbolic.
Right.
It's got nothing to do with anything. If there's concerns that E&D at the school should be spent for something else, let those concerns be addressed through the budget process. But let's not, on this committee, let's not pre-negotiate something in the budget process. So that's my own opinion about it. I think we should just approve the article for the 200 or whatever the number is, and it's free and clear, which is what it's intended to be, free and clear.
Yeah.
So, I have a question.
Go ahead, Arthur.
So, and again, coming extraordinarily late to this, support the overall goal very much. I don't understand the left-hand, right-hand school. Everyone seems to support this except for the school itself, I guess. There's a concern that if they pitch in money for something that they're going to benefit from a maintenance perspective, how is that? I guess I don't understand the concern.
Well, in the first place, they're pitching
Actually,
in money.
I'll let
But
let me recognize.
the school has no money
Yeah.
except what we give them.
Right.
Right.
Our concern was pitting the operations budget against this capital project. The school committee truly believes that this is needed. There is no question in anybody's mind that this is needed. However, we did not want it funded at the expense of the operations budget. For example, you all needed to cut our budget by how much? What was the 100,000? Okay. Well, because you said you had limited funds this year. But if you're paying for a bond, principal and interest, over a 4-year period of $200,000, that's $50,000, half of what you cut out of our operations budget, which could be going to our operations budget as opposed to going to the turf fee. So to Pat's point, that's what we were concerned about, and that's what, in fact, has happened.
Well, except never in our discussion did we connect the two.
Yeah.
No, but the reality,
So-
I understand that you didn't
Right.
connect the two.
No,
You
no,
didn't-
no,
You didn't
and-
connect the two, and nor was it truly related.
Yes,
But the reality is, if money is tight, and you have enough money to pay for principal and interest
mhm,
of $50,000 a year,
Mhm.
well, why can't that go to the operations budget instead? So that's.
yeah, except, I mean, we have numerous articles that are
Yeah.
financial in nature, and eventually in a town, everything is one bucket, and so each one is appraised on its own merits.
Right.
And so, I don't think, just because this happens to be two, let's call them King Philip related, we're not saying there's a limit on the amount that the town is willing to put into the King Philip Regional School System. And so we've got these two articles, let's split it up. That's not the intent at all.
No,
Yeah.
we understand that, but I guess it's simply if there wasn't enough money to fund the operations budget, then,
Yes,
you know, theoretically, it
Right.
appears as if there shouldn't be enough money then to fund the other article.
Capital items are one-time expenditures only, operations are ongoing.
yeah,
Understood,
so,
but
so
that's
that's,
Apples and oranges, I'm not
so
even
that's
sure why
really
we're
how we
discussing
look
them
at
in the
it,
same sentence.
is a view of, we have money that we want to spend on capital-oriented projects, and we have money that we want to spend on an ongoing operational basis. And so, it's in that light that we evaluate each article.
Yeah, buying a police car does not address the salaries of the police officers.
I
It's
understand
apples
that,
and
but you were
oranges.
asking for an explanation.
Yeah,
of-
no, I understand, I understand your point that it could be viewed as, people might view it as, geez, well, if you're willing to put 100 in X, why wouldn't you just put the whole thing over in Y type of thing? But again, I don't think we're looking at the two articles as connected. So I wouldn't be concerned from that perspective. I mean, if we decided, if our, you know, I think in our discussion, there was support for the project, but
Yes.
let's say we're on the other side, for whatever reason, there wasn't support for the project, we wouldn't turn around and say, okay, now we want to add 150,000 to the King Philip budget.
You might not say that.
Isn't your,
Somebody else might say that.
we wouldn't say
No.
that. If E&D is your free cash, is that an equivalent explanation?
Our excess and deficiency account is more like your stabilization.
Yes, yeah.
It's not-
So-
It's
it
more
is
an
not-
So
emergent,
it shouldn't
more
be used-
emergency funds than,
So what you're saying is that you don't want to use that at all ever for operation? You want to use that strictly for capital? Is that what you're saying?
Our history has been to use it for capital, but at the same time, we have historically used a significant portion of it towards operations as well.
And you know that, the budget we've talked about and discussed here last week was upwards of, what, $500,000 of free cash we were
Within the
dipping
town.
into within the town's
yes,
budget.
yes.
So it's, I understand that sometimes you have to use some of that funds for,
Which we have for our operations budget.
right.
And we also have for our capital budget as well, because we have funds that we're using out of excess and deficiency, that's the amendment on the amended article on the warrant, for the project up at the middle school. So it's not as if we have not, aren't willing to use those funds. But, like your stabilization, we consider that for extraordinary purposes and not to, and we have tried to maintain it at a certain level in order to provide for a boiler going, something that hits the fan that we have to deal with, because keeping in mind, we're rarely coming back, we've never come back for a supplemental budget.
So if you lose a boiler or a roof or something like that, that's your rainy day fund, basically. Yeah.
Although there have
And
been
we-
times when there have been rainy day kinds of events, and the school has had to come to the towns for extra money, and
Sure.
the towns have
Yep.
been forthcoming with that extra money.
I mean, the three towns have been very, very supportive. Nobody's arguing with that at all. In terms of, the first we heard about using E&D was after your meeting, when it filtered down to us. We haven't had any conversations about that at all.
To be
Right.
honest, there are other towns within the district that don't want us to use it.
And what's your E&D balance? Just ballpark.
Expecting certification.
We're expecting certification of 890,000, of which we've designated 200,000 so far. The 50,000 for the additional for the sanitary project, and then the school committee voted 150 towards the budget to reduce assessment.
I think the key point on this E&D stuff is that we're not the ones negotiating the use of E&D. That has to be a three-town deal. And we just unilaterally stuck 50,000 of E&D into this thing, and I don't think, and that just guarantees it's
Just
not
on
gonna
that
happen.
point, how did you come to that conclusion,
How do we come to what conclusion?
about the allocation of E&D?
The article that was, as it was amended last week, interjected 50,000 of E&D. I've never come to that
Yes.
conclusion.
By default.
Is it in the?
By default.
Because-
No, it's
It's
not
not-
the
we
language.
didn't
What's
direct it
that?
to B and D. It just-
We didn't, there was no language, we
Right,
actually
but there
didn't see a
isn't,
motion,
but there isn't another source of money.
but there was no direction that it come from E&D. So are you saying that?
The direction was it comes from the school's budget,
Correct.
Yeah,
which
Some-
translates into E&D.
does it?
Yeah.
And I guess my problem, my, feeling is that a field is something you definitely need. And it is part of the educational component of high school. And so I think to me, it seems like there's a bit of a disconnect between the field being, people looking at it as just an athletic, it's just a football team. And that's not what it is. You got band, you got all kinds of activities
We
there.
understand that fully. We've been the
Yeah,
ones
so
saying
it's
all
like,
along,
I don't understand why, and I agree with you, Pat, that if we did this independently and the other towns go ahead and come up with the 200,000, it looks silly. It does.
It's more than that, it just won't happen under those circumstances.
But if the other towns look at it and say, that's not a bad idea, it does, to me, it makes some sense that there's some contribution from the schools where the towns are kicking in,
But the
a
appropriate way to
substantial
do
amount of
that
money.
is through the budget process.
Well, isn't that what we're doing?
We're talking about an article here to fund a turf field. We're not talking about the K&P budget at this
And to
point.
be fair, that's not coming from
And-
us, it's a citizen's petition.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
not-
isn't the money that we raised actually coming from all sorts of events that we've held at the school? I mean, that certainly has been part of the $400,000. Not only are some of us putting in lots of money, but there have been lots of student advocacy involved in the entire process. And by the way, I'm Barbara Sneed, and I'm a co-chair of the turf field committee.
Yeah, assuming that the turf field gets put in, which again, I think is a great idea, will this or will this not impact your operational budget?
Over time, it should.
Make it go down, right?
Beneficial.
And I guess if you, again, I don't want perfect to be the enemy of good enough. This is obviously, a lot of people have put in a lot of work on this. Personally, I'm inclined to support even if it's some more money. However, it just feels odd to come and say that the school is contributing nothing. So I don't care what the figure is, if it's 50 or not 50, it just nothing at all, especially when there's a budget benefit. I appreciate the sequence of events and what folks are actually saying, and I know that a lot of the community are going out of their way to contribute a lot. It sort of felt odd to me.
Let me address a point on that. That there's this notion that has been pervasive for a very long time that I think is basically incorrect, that KP is some sort of external party to the towns. KP is the town's high school. Now, if the elementary school had a boiler problem, we wouldn't say to the elementary school, we'll fix the boiler 75%, but you've got to come up with the other 25%. It's just not, KP is as much our school as our elementary schools are. They don't get any money from anywhere except the money that we give them, and we give them that money through the budget process. This
And
is
that's where
an
E&D comes,
independent.
and that's where
This
E&D
is an
comes.
independent, freestanding attempt to give the school a gift of the turf field, to give our kids all the activities, this turf field. And if we entangle it with the budget, we're gonna kill it, because the other towns are not going at it this way.
See, and Pat, I think that's a very eloquently way of putting, kind of segregating the issue out, and it's not it's just like you said, the communities have rallied and been able to bring in 400 that's effectively free for the taxpayers, and if the three towns can come up with the remaining 600, we get a turf field at only 60% of the cost to the three towns, and hence to our high school. And so, I agree. To me, it ultimately comes back to, I don't think we should be thinking of it as, well, let's take some money out of this pocket, that's really our pocket, i.e. this quote-unquote separate King Philip, and put it into this project. I think it's just, we're evaluating a capital project. For our high school, we happen to have 3 towns that create our high school, so we each get to evaluate it, but, I think if we all move in the same direction, we'll end up with a great turf field at a reduced price for the townspeople, so.
I also like to address the
Hang on
point
one- yes.
that about the 50,000 that could be used here instead of being used there. We're borrowing this. Our payments are in the future. We have other borrowings that will be rolling off, so this will be a plus against those negatives. So this is not necessarily extra money that can then, if we weren't borrowing this, that we would necessarily have this for any other purpose. So
It's-
I
I think
think
it-
that notion also is incorrect. This is on its own merits.
$50,000 is not, in the scheme of things, is not a lot of money. But I agree with Art that, and I feel the same way, is that we want to support this. And, if we have to do it this way, then we have to do it this way. But it just seems a little bit to me like, nobody's giving in. Like this is, and I understand this history that we didn't know about last week. We had no clue about it. And it just didn't make sense to me that we're not getting any contribution from the school towards a project that benefits the school. And it
But
seems
the
like.
school is us.
School, I agree, the school is us, and I completely agree with that. But at the same time, there is a pool of money that the school has control over that could be used to contribute towards this project. Like I said, if this is the way it's got to go, then I'll bend and I'll go with that. But it just feels funny.
Yeah, it's not an effort to say that, I agree, the school is us, and I think that works both ways, is my only point. But, I mean, again, I'm inclined to support this either way. Again, I don't want,
We get,
perfection to be the
yeah.
enemy of good enough, like I said
Right.
before.
Anne-Marie, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
I had a couple of points. First of all, I do want to expel the notion that we are against the turf field because it will affect our teacher negotiations. That's never, ever been the case. Our concern is making it look like the turf field is overriding our operations budget. To be honest, I've been on the committee for 4 years. We come to you, once a year, looking for budget numbers to all 3 towns that have been suffering. And, we come with a number, it gets cut, classrooms with 35 students, you know the story, you've told it 1,000 times. And I've heard from people, I'm not for giving money to the turf field while there's still 35 kids in my kid's class. So that makes it a difficult line for us to straddle, but it's not a negotiations tactic, it's not a negotiations issue at all. It's more a case of we're trying to give the students in the building the best education they can get, and we understand that the turf field I think it's a wonderful idea. I wish my son graduated 3 years ago and he would have loved to have been playing on it. And I have, Plainville's history, I've raised a lot of money for fields that went in after my kids went through them. So I'm aware of how long this takes to happen. But at this particular time, it has been very difficult for us to find that pot of money that we could put towards it, because we would like to if we could. And as Paul was stating before, you know, $50,000, if you're looking for us to put $50,000 in this turf field fund, which, you know, we could potentially discuss in the future. I won't speak for the committee at this time, but it's not just 50, it's 150 because we've got the other two towns.
Yep.
And we do also have issues with the other towns and how they feel about the use of E&D, which is not necessarily how you feel about the use of E&D. So, I mean, that, we have to take that into account as well.
Okay. And Pat, you had a.
The,
Pat F.
yeah, in terms of the explanation I gave as to the balance of power, if you will, as between the two, you know, the $50,000 operating budget versus going to principal interest. Hopefully that would be a non-issue for us anyway. Hopefully, we haven't had time, as a practical matter, to address what you guys did last week. You know, we're hoping that, you know, we're still waiting on insurance numbers. We're still waiting on finalization of sped numbers. So it's as always still a work in progress in terms of the impact on the operations.
Mhm.
I guess the concern that I have is the representation that King Philip isn't willing to do its share. King Philip isn't interested. King Philip isn't willing to step up. Up until last Tuesday or Wednesday, or Monday, whenever it was that you met, using funds out of excess and deficiency had not been discussed at all. It had never been raised. We hadn't been asked. That wasn't in the discussions with the turf field committee. They were going to the towns for the funding.
Mhm.
So we haven't been asked to appropriate anything out of E&D. So to represent publicly that we're fighting contributing to it, we're not fighting contributing
Right.
to it. No, we haven't been
Right, you haven't,
asked yet.
you
It
haven't
hasn't been
assessed
part of
it.
the
Yep.
conversation.
Understood.
Okay, fair
Understood.
enough.
So that, you know, so that's.
Yeah.
And just to
Go
be,
ahead, Arlie.
Let me
If-
just
yeah, yeah,
add
no, sure,
one-
please,
One
please,
more thing.
please.
Understand that the discussion in Rentham, when the article was passed for the turf field, to establish the turf field account, they amended it to say that we were prohibited from transferring any monies from E&D into that account. That concern was reiterated when we met with the finance committee, the finance committee last week.
Of Rentham.
Of Rentham, very loud and clear. To Pat's point, you're dealing with a delicate balance here. You know, we haven't been involved in the negotiations at all, but you're dealing with 3 different towns with 3 different approaches to this thing, and I think it behooves the 3 towns to be talking to one another to make sure that everybody's gonna be on the same page. Because if you approve something that's different than what Rentham approves,
Mhm.
that's different than what Plainville approves, we got nothing. And that just puts the stake in it, and that would be horrible. We wanna see this thing get done.
And the 3 towns are talking to each other and have talked to each other, and what they came up with was
Right.
the $200,000 from
To be
us,
fair,
the
though, Pat,
160
Is that the town
from.
government or is that the turf field committee?
Well, that's the
yeah.
committee plus assorted.
Yeah, that's what my
People
concern is
involved
when it
in
gets
the-
to town meeting.
Well, the town administrators have attended some of these meetings. I do know that our own selectmen and our own town administrators have been involved in this. Of course, the other towns are responsible for their own communications, so I can't say for sure, but I don't think this is a surprise at this point to any of the selectmen or town administrators.
It may not be a surprise, but I know Plainville, for one, hasn't identified a funding source.
There was a question here in front?
Well, actually, a comment, just to continue what these 2 Pats were saying. It would be very helpful, it would be very helpful if this board was able to reach out to those other 2 towns and work this through. Because this is our school, this is a community school, we are righting a wrong. It is beyond my comprehension that we've been working on this since 2009. And we've only raised $400,000 in that period of time. And we pay money to have the marching band out on the field, out in the parking lot. We pay money for our lift, we pay money for lights, we bus kids to other fields. We couldn't have our football game there this Thanksgiving. So we are putting good money after something that's just doesn't make any sense to me. So it would be, my point is, it would be helpful if you guys would help us.
Sorry, just
Actually, sorry,
the affiliations again, forgive me.
Go ahead, Harley.
There's
Co-chair.
turf committee and there's school committee.
Yes.
Yes.
And so you're all school committee.
No.
No, I'm
Sorry.
turf field.
So when,
Also KP money.
Yeah, King Philip Music and School Council.
okay,
So I
But it-
represent 3 groups.
as you speak in terms of describing helping you.
The turf field committee. Because we don't have the relationship that you guys seem to have with us. You are much, we are able to have an open dialogue and discuss it, and when you've got the 3 different towns, it is very, very difficult to push anything through. And I think it's about time the 3 towns start talking in a bigger way than we have up to this point.
Yes, ma'am.
You're on the wrong side of the room.
Yes.
It's hard to keep track. Would you like to actually join us at the
Yeah.
table?
Yeah, you can scoot up, you can scoot up.
We got-
woman needs to represent on the advisory board. I know she's absent today, but I'm a parent. I'm also a teacher in Franklin. I've been a teacher for 16 years. You may have gotten my email. So I'm well aware of our school system, and I have to say, I do appreciate a turf and football, and I understand it's a part of our, it is a part of our school. However, I have serious concerns about the quality of education that we have right now in Norfolk. We're a very small town. I understand our tax base is primarily the citizens, in real estate tax. I'm concerned about the class size. I'm concerned about MCAS scores. I'm concerned about sending my children to school. And I feel at this point, to take money away from the school budget and apply it to a turf, the full 150, 200, whatever, you know that it won't be 150 because pledges will back out, something will happen, there'll be more money. And to take it away from the school, when we have class sizes the way they are, MCAS scores the way they are, special ed costs, because I work in special ed, you can't get away from it. You can't, because of IDA. We're funding it, even though we're not supposed to, the towns. I just feel like, as my father would say, you can't have champagne taste on a beer budget. You just can't take it away from the school to apply a very nice turf.
So, just to be clear, I mean, earlier in the conversation, we said this isn't a discussion of school budget operating funds versus taking it from there and putting it into a turf field.
So where would the money come from? So what is the E&D? So why is school committee here? If you're work,
Well, can I ask just
Yeah.
because that's a great question, and I don't know if you've seen the article that we voted on. Is this because sometimes we get articles that no one has seen. They're the best ones.
But you vote on them.
Is
do our
sometimes,
best.
well, it keeps us out of trouble. But neither
Well, we
the
haven't voted
article
on this one yet.
or
Our initial discussion was in
Right.
that direction.
right. Thank you. Yes, but my point is that there's no mention of how you may choose to fund this, or at all, as far as I read this. So, to speak to the issue of your E&D funds, I think it certainly sounds like you've got significant concerns there, and if that's not an appropriate place to find the cash, then you should not go there. That was not the intention of the article as I understood it. Now maybe if there's other wording in a motion or something, I can't speak to that, but that was certainly not the intention that I had in discussing it. I could imagine that there are at least two other sources of funds. Maybe you could clarify for me as whether or not you think they are meaningful. Actually, perhaps there are three. One is, it could be your operating budget, I suppose, and there we've heard the concerns, which we'd all share, that it was trading off. Two is, I suppose, you could go out to that one elephant out there on the potential donor list and say, hey, look, here's an opportunity to make a big difference.
We've been there.
Perhaps that doesn't work. And with three, there's a capital budget that is occasionally tapped. And frankly, the only reason I'm fully aware of that is that we've suddenly started voting on it for reasons I have no idea why, after many years, we have to start voting on
No,
capital.
I can explain that to you. The reason, it's not voting on a capital budget. It is any funds that we spend, because they're taxpayer dollars,
Right.
have to be approved by the three towns. So if we're taking money out of E&D and using it for any particular purpose, it still has to be accounted for and approved by the three towns.
Thank you. I don't want to get, thank you for that clarification. If then capital is another word for withdrawing from E&D, then I guess that's a duplicative, so maybe it goes off the list. But as we discussed last night, there was no specification, or last week, that it comes from E&D. So if that's a particular concern, then you were not getting any direction from the town of Norfolk, at least in my opinion, to do that.
But what they were, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, now, of course, I guess maybe there is a third way of funding this. You could put it in your operating budget. Is that how you'd fund it? If you had to spend $1 million, would you put it in your operating, or would you borrow?
Operation.
It wouldn't fall, because of the wear and the use of the field itself doesn't fall under the guidelines from DESI. It has to be
Okay.
considered a capital project.
So you'd consider it a capital project, and you'd bring that forward to be funded by the town. And then presumably, if you did that, it would be, I guess, those would be split in proportion to the
Well, that's
towns.
what, I think that's what the warrant
Yes.
article is doing.
Yes.
That's the warrant article that's been proposed.
Well, we're not clear that's the lineage of it. I mean, I know we're encouraged to think of it as a gift. That's what we're sort of stretching
Right,
for in
right,
part, is
right.
to understand what this is different, because normally capital spending doesn't involve huge contributions from the public, which are greatly appreciated, but that's what's kind of throwing us a
Right.
little bit, is I'm not sure what kettle of fish this belongs in.
The one and only entire purpose of this article was to pay our share of $600,000 so that it does not involve the school budget, anything. That we can get the damn turf field built, we can do it for $1 million, and our share of that $1 million is roughly $200,000. End of story. No whose budget, capital, proration, just give them the doggone money to get the turf field done and built.
Which we could think of as a
And
capital
we're talking
project.
about the difference between 150 and 200, which is $12,000 a year spread over 4 years. And that's the difference between whether the field happens or doesn't happen for Norfolk.
One more question.
Go ahead.
One more observation, if I may. And I think we were on TV last week. I did not sense that there was support elsewhere in the town for 200,000. So,
But there is for 150.
yes. So just sharing the information. And
Yeah, I don't know if I would characterize it that way, Harley. In the sense, I'm not so sure. There was, I think the discussion was, there was a sense of support for the project.
Right, right.
I think it was, as we started this discussion, the concept of sharing the cost between.
That's probably, yes,
Yes.
yes, I don't, right.
So there
I shouldn't
wasn't-
put it any specific
yes.
dollar figure on it, you're right. I
Yes.
think.
And
that-
now with more information, I think now we're, either we're sticking with that concept or we're going back to the three towns are
Right.
going to.
Now, the
put
other
the
question
money.
would be is if another town reneges, if Rentham or Plainville reneges, this plan is out, this $200,000 comes back to Norfolk. This doesn't get
Yes.
spent on
Right, it
anything,
probably
any
wouldn't-
other
Probably
projects.
wouldn't be borrowed
Right.
until it's.
Because we're not putting it to their operating budget or
Right.
capital,
Right.
it's a one-time thing. I'm feeling like making a motion, but is there
Go
more
ahead.
discussion?
Fire
I
away.
move to reconsider Article 17.
Well, we're actually, we're gonna be voting all of them.
All of
for
them,
the first
okay.
time, so you can start with an initial motion.
Last
Oh.
week doesn't count, right? Last week was a.
Yes,
I-
yes, it was a practice.
Okay. I vote to approve
Look at the
Articles-
attention it drew.
Article
Exactly.
17 in the
That's
original
good. We
funding
gotta do
amount of
more practice like
$200,000.
this.
All
Sorry.
right, so we have a motion to approve Article 17 with a funding limit of $200,000. Do I have a second?
By borrowing.
As specified in the article.
Second.
One comment about
Yes.
that is the
They
two
will be
hundred thousand dollars
adjusted, yeah.
is a placeholder number.
Right.
Okay,
Our pro rata share is gonna be around that, but we don't
All
know
right,
the
so-
exact number just yet.
We're open to
plus or
bids.
minus a reasonable amount, but, because I'm assuming when, at town meeting, we'll actually make a motion with
For
dollars.
the exact
Yes,
amount, and
yes.
maybe even the warrant will get, I just wanted to make it
Yes.
clear that if it comes out to be.
Yeah, we're gonna be tight.
I have to make a motion.
We're gonna be tight on the warrant, that's
Something.
going to the printer
want a motion?
Monday,
Go
I
so.
figured if it comes out to be, well, I mean, I think we should
Yes.
maybe word it approximately 200,000
Yes.
or something,
Are
but,
you
but
fine?
just so we're all
You fine
clear
with that,
that
Arthur?
it's
Our
not
representation
Approximately
of the
two-thirds.
Can we put approximately in a,
Well, it's just our recommendation.
fine,
You're
fine.
correct.
It has to
We
be
are
a-
getting bids
An
tomorrow.
amount. Has to
For
be
the-
Okay, so we may,
So you
We can
may-
always-
yes.
we may get a, we
Reconsider
may
it,
get,
that's fine.
we may get it in the
Yeah,
next,
600. So all we need is our pro rata share of the 600.
So we have a motion and a second?
yes, yes. And, I don't know, we've talked to you quite a bit. Did any of our participants in the audience have a final comment? I think we've taken,
I just,
Yes.
one comment for the viewing audience, and that is, we are righting a wrong. This should have happened in 2007. The fact that we were $1 million short in rebuilding that school, and because we found asbestos in the building, which did not allow us to put the actual carpet onto that field, has created this problem. Had we in 2007, had we opened up that whole override and added another $1 million, this would be done and over with, and we wouldn't have been putting all this good money after bad, as they say, or did I get that wrong? Bad money after good, I always get that wrong.
all right.
So,
Appreciate the time and
Okay.
the thoughtfulness that you guys always give us.
All right. All right, so, we'll, any further?
I'd like
Go
to
ahead,
hear
Alan.
from the selectmen on this. I had a fairly clear message from our last discussion that I'd like to understand where they're coming from.
Okay, well, we had a motion and a second, so
Yeah,
we
yeah,
definitely have to
yeah,
vote,
yeah.
but,
Yeah, no, but you asked for.
yes, yeah.
Uh,
But
Jack was here last time and shared his specific thoughts on this, yes?
Yeah, he did. Tracked it, yeah.
But I mean, perhaps this new information has brought up some additional questions, or?
Well, no, I heard a different message.
Yeah,
I was
oh,
curious.
yes, yes. I mean, at the last session, it was more of lots of folks are pitching in, very large effort by private citizens. Our question was, great, can the school committee pitch in as well? I mean, tonight, it's much more of even if they were to do that, that would simply end up being a separate capital item, which would come as a separate warrant article, so let's just throw it all in the same article from my perspective.
But I think it's a point very well made, that none of us should be wasting time with an uncoordinated action that might not be supported unanimously by all the key players. So obviously, it wouldn't work if the school committee didn't strongly endorse whatever action was taken, whatever action was taken. If you don't endorse it, it doesn't go. I presume the turf committee would speak on it, but the selectmen would have to speak on it. And I think these points are controversial and important, so you'd have to expect that strong, unanimous feel from one town in order to get them all. So if the momentum is truly coalescing to get all that strong support across the board, then maybe we've accomplished our mission to get the strong support. But I'd hate to go out there with something that didn't have that support. It just seems like that would be not doing this important issue justice, frankly.
Part of, I think, what I'm hearing
So,
at least tonight.
editorialization.
I should say, part of what I'm hearing tonight is that there is a lot of support surrounding the article as exactly written. While I may have additional questions about it. I think I can appreciate
Right.
what's gotten us to this
Right.
point and where we're at in the process. This is somewhat late, not that it's just want to follow the herd, but I think, I mean, I agree with a lot of the merits in this. I think that a lot of us do. To me, the delta and the difference of the cost, and I just, it would seem that, at least from my perspective, I'm eager to support it as written and as proposed.
All right. Okay, well, why don't we take a vote here? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, it is a vote.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for all the
Thank you.
input.
Thank you.
You're welcome
Don't
to
wanna
stay
for all the other ones?
Yeah.
listen through all the other ones, but you're not
Fair
obligated.
weather fans.
Yes.
Expecting is just their share of the 600
Right,
grand.
right.
We're figuring, we don't know what the real number's gonna be anyway.
We'll know,
So
right,
that's why
yeah.
we picked
Oh, we'll
600.
know something closer.
It'll go down to 150.
Yes.
After the bid.
We're just joking, that's what we're just joking.
Yeah,
Right.
Or
bid,
maybe,
bid well.
maybe some of the people we're still chasing after will come
Things
through.
rarely go down.
Yes. All right, our second,
The concern is what happens when it goes up by a little bit, right?
all right. Our
It goes up?
second one
We're a little
that we
over.
have, besides just kind of going through the other motions that we've all discussed, this is the other article that we didn't have any information on, so, and even this, Jack sent this to me a little back. So this is the town center sewer division fund, so that's a separate enterprise fund. We're voting that as Article Article 7. So we had skipped over that discussion last week because the first pass wasn't quite ready. So I would still say this is a first pass. Jack had mentioned he thought the budget would be around 110,000. He's currently at, so it's on the, how did I show these? Okay, I've actually passed it out with with page 2. So the 98,000.
Right.
If you flip it the other way, sorry, I passed it out upside down. But, so Jack's currently at 98,000. He's actually reviewing it with the selectmen next Wednesday. So there's some element, I'm kind of leaning more towards, we can just keep this, chew on it, and before town meeting, we could do a quick vote. But because I do have some concern, I'd like them to finish their discussions before we're
Weighing in.
weighing in on a budget, or at least making a recommendation on a budget. We could certainly weigh in. But I will say, I think from Jack's perspective, this is, it's pretty much what where he thought they were going to come out. There's a few capital type items
Right.
that they've built up. Remember the discussion last fall was there's some amount of reserves already built up. So I think these, the capital one-time project items would go against the reserves as opposed to being part of the ongoing budget.
Well, I was wondering about that because.
Yeah,
it's a
because-
First year thing,
Right,
there can be no risk of shortage, right?
Right,
Because it's an
right.
enterprise fund, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, that sounds familiar to me, that you mentioned
yes,
that there is some money built up that will be inheriting from the
right.
previous owner.
Right.
Like,
Right.
was it
Right.
$500,000 or something?
No, no, no.
I thought it was a fair amount of money.
I wish.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
No, I think it was closer to 100,
Was it?
more in the 1 to 2.
Okay.
We'll take what we
I
can get.
remember it as a
But-
reasonably big number. but,
Yes, yes,
I guess 100,000 against 100,000 budget's a pretty good reserve.
right, right.
We'd hope.
So, I don't know, we could delve into it, we could just wait and let them, I'm more inclined to wait, but I wanted to just pass that out and let everyone, so, if
May I
anything
ask
change,
just-
yes.
What are they doing?
So that runs the, the waste treatment facility that we purchased in the fall?
So we had the guy who had built it
Yes.
for
The
development
town,
up there.
Town Hill
We
condominiums?
acquired that.
Yes.
And with the ambition potentially of connecting it to the rest of downtown?
It does
or
have,
is
it does
just
have connections, that would be a longer term, like Walgreens is connected
Right.
to it currently, so, I believe, let's see, correct me if I get off base from from everyone's memory of the discussion last fall, but yes, I believe the idea would be to help encourage development downtown. We would allow, we would run a line to allow others to connect to it.
So that would be one of the ideas behind the special projects, the capital stuff, that it would expand the capacity or those interconnections?
I don't think it's capacity level even as built. I think it's strictly
It's
a,
got substantial over,
Excess
way
capacity.
over capacity.
That's what I
Yeah, we'll
remember,
cover the
yeah.
bill.
Yeah.
So we can, they were talking about connecting a lot more to it
Right.
in the future.
This sounds like, I remember when, was it Jack that was talking about it, that there was stuff that needed to be replaced and maintenance and that
Yes.
sort of stuff. And looking at these items, replace this, replace that, that kind of sounds
Right.
like the kind of thing he was talking about.
Right.
That there was a certain
Yeah.
amount of work that needed to be done.
I would agree. I don't think there's anything in this budget, Arlie, that leads to the, you know, we'll
Specific.
run to,
Right.
you know, have more people connecting. I think that would have to be part of a development plan.
We're running it, he said it was running at some very low
Oh,
percentage
yeah.
of
Wasn't it
capacity, like
5%?
15 to
Yeah,
20%
that's what I thought,
capacity or
5, 10,
something.
something like
said
that,
five.
yeah.
So there's plenty of capacity, it sounds like, it's just the connections.
Right,
This is more of the ongoing maintenance schedule, I think it's not
yeah.
anything new or expensive.
I only retained vague impressions of the
Don't we all,
conversation.
don't we all?
Yeah. All right, so
But we'll defer for the moment.
yeah, I think it'd be worth, we'll get once it's finalized next week at the selectmen's meeting, then before town meeting, we'll
Speaking
give
of
a
things we
final
deferred, the
recommendation.
planning board, you know,
Yes.
the article about the downtown zoning.
Yes.
Did
That was
planning have their
pulled.
meeting, and if they voted? And,
I don't know, I'm not clear where they ended up. I know
Okay,
the
so-
article is pulled off, it's not on the
It's
warrant.
pulled off, okay,
Yes.
Oh.
so we don't have to worry
Yeah.
about it.
So-
All right.
Oh,
So that one is,
Okay.
this was the unnumbered article at the
Right.
end of the
Yeah,
the
okay.
last warrant we had.
Oh, I mean the planners zoning change.
Yes,
That's
that's
the
the
one you-
article
okay,
that,
not Not the driveway one.
not the driveway, that's,
Okay.
yeah. The two, we have two zoning left, the driveway and the solar wind
Right.
amendment.
Okay.
But, all right, okay, well, why don't we, we'll go through and just quickly, I don't know if we need to rediscuss, Pat, I know you, hopefully you had a chance to look through the stuff, and, but if you have any additional questions, since you went there, that'll, feel free to throw some out.
Yeah, I
Yep.
don't think so. I mean, I think I've
All
been
right.
part
So we have to
of
resume.
the discussions of all
We're
of these,
gonna,
except that one article we just got.
yes, all right.
yeah,
Motion to approve Article 2?
seconded.
All right, that's, actually, we're,
Wait a minute.
that's the one we're moving to IP, right? There aren't any, so move to IP Article 2 is.
Yeah, motion to
Yes.
IP Article 2. sorry.
Seconded.
All right. We're not aware of any unpaid bills, so, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed, abstentions, all right, that's unanimous. Next one is Article 4, this was the compensation schedule. All right, so, as we talked last time, just real quickly, it's the, you know, it's 1.5%, same as last year, consistent with the other
Right.
similar schedules via the, whether you're in the union or the contract.
Motion to approve?
Seconded.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? All right, Article 5 is the budget that we discussed last week in detail, no changes from what we discussed.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, opposed, abstentions, none. Article 6 was the water division that we reviewed last week. No changes to that one either.
Move to approve?
All right,
Second?
all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, none, it's unanimous. We'll skip Article 7 for just before town meeting, which is the sewer division we just were discussing. So Article 8 is the capital that will fund via free cash. That was the list, it totaled 289,000. Had the couple of police cars, the fire equipment, and a few other items.
And that's coming out of free cash, not
That
gonna
is
be
coming out of
bonded?
free cash using the prison mitigation funds.
Motion approved.
Seconded.
All right. Any further discussion?
Just one more
Yes.
question.
No, go
Are we
ahead.
gonna get the prison mitigation funds?
These
we
are the
sure
funds
of
we
that?
already
Are the
have.
ones we already have?
Yes.
Right.
In
Yeah.
hand, yeah.
So, if we get them for this year, that would go into free cash for next year.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
so I guess effectively, we've kind of moved to a in arrears approach to
Yeah.
our
Good idea.
to our prison.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably is.
Yeah.
So at least,
Yeah.
yeah, we know we got the money. We have it in our bank account.
Yeah.
And
Until
there
it's in the
won't be
account.
any. Yes, there won't be any.
It's a good idea, albeit it makes clear the absolute arbitrariness of the capital budget. I mean,
Yeah.
what is the fact that we get $263,000 from the prison mitigation fund have anything to do with capital needs of the
Right.
town?
Yes.
But
It's a
Well, that-
remarkable coincidence, Arlie.
Well, that
is
would-
indeed.
It's
It is indeed.
amazing.
It is
Although
indeed.
Arlie, that one funds Article 8, but Article 9
That's
is
a good
where,
point. Very
yes,
good point.
is where
Yes.
we would pick up the stuff we absolutely have to buy that we can't pay for through our prison mitigation funds. And, sorry, before we move on, I don't think we actually voted Article 8, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Opposed, abstentions, none. Alrighty. Alrighty, Article 9, continuing on. So this one is, we have one item. It's the ambulance replacement.
And was this leasing? Were they gonna?
Yeah,
what
but
was
it's
that?
lease to own, so I'm not quite sure why we call it leasing, because
Yeah.
to me it sounds like,
Sounds like
it
borrowing.
must, other than maybe there's a technical
Yeah,
aspect to it.
we asked
'cause-
Jack if he could look at the
Yeah.
borrowing for
Yeah.
a
Yeah,
lease like that?
Well, I
instead
believe
of
the way
leasing
we
or-
left it, and he agreed, is whichever form will be the
Right.
lesser of cost,
Right.
i.e.
Oh.
if it's through a leasing company, effectively what's their
Or just-
embedded
or just
rate
borrowing
versus
it.
what we could borrow and pay for with a
I think
an
it has a
offering.
little bit more of an implication though, because I think traditionally leases we approve in the operating budget.
Correct, that
And-
would be true.
And so, I think if it were a lease, we wouldn't use this mechanism to fund it. I think.
That's a good
we-
point.
That's- yeah,
I
that
think
is a
it
good
has to
point.
be borrowed or cashed. to do
Plus,
that.
the
Right.
town administrator's comment here is it requests the authority to borrow.
It is borrowing, yeah.
So I guess it's not a lease then.
By definition, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, why would you put a lease in a separate?
Yeah.
But that's a good catch. It would be, operating otherwise.
Right, but there was this discussion of a lease, right? It's not.
Yes.
It wasn't.
No, that was the,
Maybe I'm getting confused.
right. I think, I don't know, my suspicion has been using the term lease, but really mean we're gonna borrow, but,
I make a
to your
motion.
point, well, we could also hold off on this one and get a clarification, because the idea was if, remember Jackie, they were expecting it near the end of the year, so the actual payments in FY16 were going to be fairly small.
I think we should just approve it based on borrowing, and then if that doesn't work out, they
If that's
come
not
back.
what we,
You
yeah,
can
if
If
we
we have to
come back.
reconsider, we can
Right.
reconsider. I
Well,
agree.
or, more to your point, Arlie, I think if we actually are going to lease it, then we'd have to do a transfer in the fall.
Yeah.
So,
Right,
because
we do
it has to go
right,
into the,
right.
it has to go into the operating budget if we're
Right.
gonna lease it,
So is that a motion I heard?
Move to recommend borrowing $235,000 for purpose of buying an ambulance, as described in detail somewhere.
Seconded.
All right, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All righty. Abstentions, objections, none. Okay. Article 10 is the capital budget for debt-funded road projects. We don't have any
Motion to
for
IP.
this meeting.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to IP. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. And we are up to Article 13, which is the standard article on the revolving funds. Maybe Pat, just a quick one. We did have a brief discussion with Jack on that one, and ultimately we decided for this year, we're just gonna leave them.
Yeah, we're not gonna touch it.
We keep
Take
pushing it
a,
off.
and reassess
That
them.
revolver's lay.
Confused with all the prior years in which we.
Which we also
decided to.
said, one of these days
Yeah,
we'll,
One of these days, right?
yeah, let's try and get rid of some of these
said he'd
small
look
ones.
at it.
Thing is,
Yeah.
Jack doesn't like them either. from
No,
what I
no,
understand,
no,
right?
yeah. Although he did say, I mean, I think our main point is, it feels like it's just extra work for little amounts. And Jack did say that, it's
There
really
wasn't any extra.
minimal, almost non-existent extra works, and so there's some element where it's not a huge issue to keep them either,
Right.
so.
I move to recommend approval of Article 13.
Seconded?
Okay, although, any further discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstentions, unanimous. Now up to Article 24.
Well,
Oh, is this one I know?
Yes,
Cool.
very well put.
Oh.
So we had
Yeah,
a,
that one.
we had a good discussion with this one, and,
Yeah, so this is
So-
basically trying to improve the sort of contract best practices for contracts that go over a year for any committee needs to have the selectmen sign off. As a simple mechanism of having a little more scrutiny, a little more, as I mentioned, best practices around it. They've had some cases where you've had a contractor who's just kind of gone on and on and on. Perhaps the deliverables weren't as well defined, some questions about, and it were not huge amounts of dollars, but still it's something that they felt could be tightened up. Anything you guys want to add about that discussion?
no, I think that was
The
pretty
Board
much
of
it.
Selectmen
This
don't
was,
approve these things
No,
as things
this
stand
is
now?
why,
How-
this is
how
why
do-
this is being
How are they
proposed.
finalized?
If
Like
it's
we
a-
sign things.
The health
If-
department can.
If it's an independent
the health
board.
board,
Yeah.
because they're independent board, they can sign their own contract.
Ah, okay.
and it's
But-
not our money, right, that they're signing, that they're spending. It's other.
Yeah, it tends to be monies going through, because if it was through the budget, then you do have the oversight. But if it's through their various revolving funds, then,
But that's still,
Yeah.
that's still town money
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
indirectly or potentially town
Yeah.
money.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It was just the
Somebody's paying.
building department and the, right? Is that what it was?
Planning and health, I
And
think,
health.
and probably conservation.
Conservation, I would think, too.
Yeah.
There was concern
Sure.
too about, we want to retain the attendance, that would be nice, the independence of various boards. So, this really wasn't a mechanism for the selectmen to be sticking their nose in all over the place, but it was just seen as the simplest way to have some kind of say in contracts that go over a year. So if there's something immediate that somebody needs, by all means, but for larger money. That was kind of the gist of discussion.
Yep.
I move that we approve Article 24.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions, objections, none, all right. And that is, Article 28, all right, so.
There's going to be no motions on this one.
Oh, yeah, did
So,
you just clarify how that's gonna be?
I wrote some language.
so.
I gave it to the esteemed chairman
Article
here.
Article 28 is,
What is that one I have?
this is the,
Oh, yeah, this thing.
It's the,
yeah, it's the solar and the wind
Oh, yeah.
modification.
Is it, that was G?
Oh, I'm
right?
getting this confused, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
This is
no,
different.
No,
yeah,
this
yeah,
is-
no, not the one that.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the school
yes.
stuff, but no, this is different.
Right.
Solar.
Yeah,
So this one, we had a brief discussion in a prior meeting and voted to IP. Then we discussed last week, Bob Bullock came in and gave a little more background, explained a little further, special permits don't really allow you a denial as much as can put conditions on it.
yeah.
And effectively, today, you can, put a solar field in a, if you have an empty field, you could do
Like
that
in your
if you wanted
backyard
to.
or something.
No, it'd have to be a separate lot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because, but this amendment would require that there be a primary use of the land, either for, a residential building
Just like
or
a house or something there.
So if you're willing to put it in your backyard, that's okay, but if you're
Hmm.
willing, you happen to have a vacant lot in the middle of a development, you can't put up a solar field there.
Without a special permit.
Without a special permit.
And that way the neighbors would be involved, because there was some cases, someone just putting something up and the neighbors really weren't that aware of it, and there was some angst, and it's since been removed, but.
Right, but now,
Well, actually, it
under
would
this
be-
point, you can't do it, period.
This would,
is-
right, you would not be able.
Without a
That's correct,
zoning,
yes, correct.
what they call it,
No.
no, for like the town did. it,
Yes, the
uh,
town would have to do an
an overlay
overlay.
district.
An overlay
If they
district,
do an
similar to
overlay
what we
district, then they
did.
could do it.
So they'd have to bring it to town meeting, though.
Yeah.
Right.
So then to add that to the overlay district, correct, it wouldn't be a special permit, it would be the overlay procedure.
So the general effect here is to liberalize the
No, I would say it's
existing
too
provision? 'Cause you can't- you
restrictive.
said you-
Other way, we
we
make it
can't do
restrictive.
To make it more
We
restrictive.
can't do it at all.
It's more
It says
restrictive.
Today,
No, now you can't.
Today
You
you can
can
do
today.
either on a piece of property with a building or on a empty lot.
Well, I thought you
With a
just said
special
you
permit.
could not do it at
With a
all.
no, no, no.
No.
If this,
What was it you're
If
saying
this
you can't do it
passes-
all?
if this passes,
you can't do it without an overlay district
okay.
being voted.
Making
by
it more
town meeting.
restrictive, so this would
Oh,
add a
overlay
restriction.
district. So you mean, wait a minute, if this passes, even a special permit won't get you there?
You
Not
cannot
for
apply
a-
for a special permit.
Because it would be out of the zone, you'd have to get a zoning.
You can do solar in your backyard or your business, you can do it in your business, but
Right.
you can't do it on a vacant lot without an overlay district being created, like they did for the town.
So if I've got an empty lot, then I got 6 neighbors that want my solar power and I'm willing to share it with them, can't do it.
I don't think
You
you can
could
do
go
that
to town
anyway.
meeting and all your neighbors could say, we all want this and add it to the overlay. The concern is the reverse, that you just put something up and the neighbors freak out. That's the experience, is the opposite.
But that, putting it up would require a special permit right now.
It would require a special permit. Under this, you
But
would
you
not.
can't be denied
So
on
the
a special permit cannot, you can't deny
Right.
somebody the use on a special permit. All you can do is kind of guide them through it, but he said, it only has, it's conditional only, but it cannot be denied, a special permit.
Well, if I got a 2-acre empty lot and my neighbors are squawking because I want to put 20 solar panels on it, and I
You
can
can-
get a special
you can do
permit
it.
to do it, I can't see a problem with my getting a special permit to do it.
You wouldn't get it, you wouldn't have a problem. You'd be able to
Today
get
you
a
could
special
do that.
permit
Today I
And
can do
today
that
you can do that,
without this,
without this.
yes.
but if I do this,
If this passes,
then I get a special permit,
You
won't
can't.
get me there.
No.
Correct.
Right.
Overlay district's the only
That's
way
what
to
I'm
do
saying, I
it.
think a special permit ought to be absolutely fine in the circumstances I just described. I don't see the need for this additional.
Because a special permit, if you're living in a neighborhood on a particular street in town, and your neighbor happens to have, there's a vacant lot between you and your neighbor, and somebody else owns that, they can clear cut it and put solar up on that lot, and there's nothing you can do about it.
But also,
nothing
if
the
I
town
have-
can do about it.
Also, if I have a 3-acre lot and I want to put 20 solar panels where
That's
nobody
okay.
can see it,
That's okay, because you live there.
no. If I have a 3-acre empty lot next to me that I own, I can't do it. under
Then you
this
can
new proposal.
you can go to town
When-
meeting and get it, do an overlay district.
Yeah, I think my interpretation, which could be wrong, is that by basically making it a solar farm, it's no longer residential use. You're basically making it a commercial use or an industrial use or something. So you're putting an industrial asset in the middle of somebody's housing.
Well, there's solar farms and there's solar panels and.
So, and
panels
they're
are
saying a
fine.
solar
So
panel on a
There's
house.
half-acre lots and there's 10-acre lots.
If
and-
there's a house there, then you're all set. But if there's not a house there, then the sense was that putting solar farms or wind farms was not in the spirit of it being a place where people are raising kids and having families, or just being,
All right, I-
So our current vote on this one was to IP it. That's where we currently stand. That was what we voted a couple of meetings ago.
But then when
When Bob
heard
came in and
this,
explained, right,
we
we
kinda
had
clarified
a
it.
sense
We
of
didn't vote, right?
we had a
We didn't
sense
revote.
to revote it. Pat has the sense to keep it where it was.
Pat's got solar panels that need.
He's got solar panels that need to,
No,
that need to be
I got-
used.
I got wetlands, I can't be putting any solar panels anywhere, so,
Right, right.
Or a wind farm, hey, it's
Yeah,
both, I
that's
think. It's also,
so, all righty, well, I understand the issue now.
Yes.
And it does impose more restrictions than now
Yes.
exist.
it's more restrictive to answer your question, right?
It does. And I don't think he was looking at this as being anything that was gonna happen overnight. This was something that was a concern that could happen, you know.
Oh, in the sense of there's a
There's
pending.
no imminent, you know.
Right, no,
Project.
somebody
Somebody
Bob
about to
wasn't.
put one up on
No, he
Right.
wasn't
somebody's
aware of it.
street.
Right, all right. So we can leave it as is, or if somebody wants to reconsider, we could start that process.
This has been
So
voted
we-
by a quorum
Yes,
already?
yeah, to IP, that was our
Okay.
original.
That was the last quorum action.
Yes,
Well,
If
no
nobody wants
motion to
to-
reconsider coming from me, so.
Well, it struck me as being sensible. I'll make a motion to approve Article 20.
oh, you have to reconsider.
A motion to reconsider Article 28, thank you.
Second.
All right. we,
This is the
got
discussion
a
phase?
Move in a second,
Go for
yeah.
the second.
Again, as I said before, I can appreciate people not wanting to live next to a solar power
on an
generating
empty lot.
asset yeah. So that's just why I thought it made sense, but.
You know, keep in mind that if you have a solar, just like ours, the Norfolk's solar generating facility, it has to be chain link fence around it, has to be secure. There are hazards. I mean, you're talking about substantial voltages. So it is something that, you know, you want to look at as more than just the aesthetics of it. It's more than
Safety,
that.
okay. Good
Well,
point.
this is just a motion to reconsider.
Right.
I'll support the reconsider.
Oh, okay.
All right, why don't we, so we'll continue the process. All those in favor of reconsidering?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Opposed, abstentions, none? Okay, so now let's continue the discussion on the reconsidering. So that's an interesting point, Rick. That it's probably more than just putting down the, because if you have an empty lot, clearly you've got some greater aspirations than just reducing your home heating costs.
I don't think, quite frankly, unless it's a vacant lot, that you either figure it's 20 years before you're gonna develop it, then it might make sense. But if you have a vacant lot that actually has some value as a business or residential, I would think you'd make more money doing that than this. So I don't see this as being imminent
A major
issue.
yes, yeah.
But I just, you know, I guess if I happen to have a vacant lot next to me, you know, then maybe I'd be concerned about it, but I don't know.
I wonder if it wasn't more of an issue when everything was crashing around us and developers did have empty lots
True.
and price of electricity was a little bit higher. And
maybe.
this might have been a way to offset a loss, really, rather than anticipate
Right,
the development.
because their lifespan's about 20 years, and then, you know, I know there's some going up in towns around us that's exactly what they're planning on doing, is putting a very large solar field up, and then 20 years from now, taking that all out and building, and doing, planning on that the future would be, it would be more viable then for building.
If it's on your lot that your house is on,
Doesn't matter.
you
That's
can
fine.
go 20 feet or whatever. You have only easement
Whatever your restrictions
considerations
are.
for your
Correct.
neighbors.
Current
Yes.
So your
restrictions.
neighbors can be looking at solar panels 20 feet away or whatever the easement consideration is.
Correct.
If you've got an empty lot and you put solar panels in, you plump them down in the center or something, subject to whatever easements, it's no better, no
Same-
worse
Same
than
easements, yeah.
if you put them on your own lot. So again, I just don't see the need to discriminate between a lot that a house is on and a lot that a house is not on.
Well,
because you
one
have
could
to-
say that if you have a house there, and I know you can get creative about it, I mean, a lot of people put it on their roofs. If there's a house on the lot, the major feature aesthetically and otherwise is the house. I mean, I don't think there's any way you're gonna get a
Although this is only on ground mounted,
ground mounted.
yes, yeah.
Still, it doesn't leave as much room. I would still say that a ground mounted solar array compared to a house, the house is still the major feature.
Right, right.
So I'm not living next to a energy production facility.
Humming away.
I mean, that's exaggerating, but yeah, I know what you mean. Yes, correct. So to me, there is a distinction.
Didn't Bob tell us that in the one case in which someone had tried to do this, to exercise their rights under the existing law, that there was, the special permitting process requires them to inform their neighbors, and the neighbors objected, and as I recall, the project didn't go through. Wasn't that what he told us?
He made it very clear that a special permit does not allow him to deny.
No, that's what I understand.
They may have just backed off because of the.
I thought they constructed
Right.
it. They actually built it, they spent the money, and then they took it out after because
That
of the
was one
objections.
panel though, wasn't it?
I don't remember the extent of it,
Right
but
on
the example
somebody's lot
he used
line.
was completely finished, constructed, then
That was,
neighbors.
yeah, that was
then
one
neighbors
panel
complained.
built on, right on somebody's lot line.
Okay, so it wasn't
And
quite
they
the
did
case.
remove it.
Yeah, okay. I don't see any reason to impose further restrictions because of this particular issue either, but.
We could revisit it in the future if there seems to be some imminent issue, you know.
Pat, what do you think? Your opposition is along the lines of, I've got a 3-acre parcel out in
Yeah, I
the,
think
out in the
there's
boonies
reasonable
and.
uses and there's unreasonable uses, and I'm
Yeah.
just not in favor of blocking all uses just because of what might be problem situations. Let's deal with problem situations with a special permitting and, if there are realistic objections, then you ought to have realistic way of enforcing those through special permitting. That's what special permitting's about, I think.
Right, but again, it's only conditional. He can only imply or impose certain conditions. He can't he can't stop you from doing something with a
Which
special
to me
permit.
works, because if the conditions of my neighbor is that I can't do it at all, that to me is an unreasonable condition. Especially since I can do it on my own property, by right,
Sorry.
subject to whatever easements there are.
And this also talks about wind, but I guess wind is not of particular concern.
I don't think around here you're gonna
You'd
get
have to
wind
be-
producing
Well,
a
somebody could put
You
it
have to have a
in.
pretty unique lot to,
400-foot tower.
to get a wind one.
Well, I think wind emphasizes more along the lines of what I, kind of those types of
Yes.
concerns than you're getting, but, yeah, I don't know, I mean, I guess, you know, it's your property, do
Although the
what you want
people in
with it.
Falmouth might debate this one.
Yeah, but they're on the ocean, I mean, you.
No,
yeah,
I know,
yeah,
but they.
I mean, that's not gonna happen.
That's a big
here.
issue in town,
We
but
don't have that kind
it's
of
two
wind.
town-owned ones, actually. that-
But somebody could put
They
in a
could.
real, you know,
They
what,
could.
20-foot tall tower with blades on it, I mean, why, it would, out of curiosity, if somebody wanted to put a wind array in, would that still be a reasonable use from your perspective?
This doesn't distinguish between wind and solar.
Choose from the
No.
south.
And again, I think it depends on circumstances. I got 3 acres and I got something off in a corner somewhere where there's nobody around. Who's gonna care, or who should care, really?
I see your point.
If it's next door to, you know, and you're hearing it, it's like the, you know, the people with the wind turbines and you
Right.
got it going all day. I think that's a perfectly valid restriction to be imposed through the permitting process.
Mhm.
That disturbing your neighbors is not allowed.
But it might be allowed.
It is,
It
it
can't-
would be allowed.
cannot
under-
be disallowed.
Yeah,
under
under the
the
special
existing.
permit.
It can be disallowed on the basis of objectionable kinds of, like we changed the whole, abutting the solar panels, abutting right up to the
Property
neighboring
line,
property
yeah.
line. I mean, those are subject to conditions. I
Well-
don't know what the conditions might be for wind, but I
My,
would
my
say there
sense
should
though was
be
that the
some.
building commissioner wouldn't have, the reason he was proposing this is, I mean, if you were to ask Bob Bullock, I think, is his name, right?
Right.
If you were to ask Bob, do you currently have the power to then prevent unreasonable things from happening, he would say no, which is why he's submitting this, was this, my sense of where he was coming
Right.
from.
That
Is
is
that
what
he
it
would
is.
not agree with that statement. Now, he could be wrong, but that's, I think, where he was coming from.
I just don't feel like we've got enough of a problem to use a sledgehammer on it.
Again,
That's
we're
basically
just
where I
making a
come down.
recommendation to town meeting, and town meeting can do whatever they.
Let the people.
I'm
All right,
I'm
well,
ready to vote and I'm not
We're
persuaded,
open,
so-
first we'll have to get a motion in one direction.
Okay, well, I move to support the building commissioner and pass Article 28.
I'll second it.
All right, we got a,
Shameless plug there.
we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Well, all due apologies to Mr. Bullock, but I think this is overkill at this point in the process, so.
All right,
Yeah, I wish he was still here to talk about it.
all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
All right, 3-2. All right, we'll have a, did you write this one up, Arthur?
No?
No, who wrote this one up?
I don't know.
You didn't?
Did I?
Oh.
No, you know what?
No, I don't think anybody was.
I didn't assign that one to him.
Did I get assigned any to write up?
Yes, you did, we passed it,
yeah.
we already passed
I
them.
did,
hope
but
you
it's
were
the
paying
ones,
attention.
I gave you 6 to 10, but I did those, so, if you wanna.
Okay, good.
If you agree with the logic.
Yeah.
I'm sure I did a great job.
Yes, they were sterling write-ups, Pat. I figured, we'd have you do the various capital articles and everything, but, since you, but I figured I'd, write it up for you.
Yeah, those are-
Yeah,
You should be
relatively
able to
straight.
cut and paste from the prior,
Yes,
pretty much, too.
yes.
But thank you.
All right.
If you need me to do anything on any of this,
Yeah,
let me know.
I'll take a look, because, actually, I know, well, Lisa has 2 relatively straightforward standard ones. I think she's come back and told me she didn't think she'll be able to be here, so I'll probably just have Jonathan do the string of those. All right, is anyone interested in starting the ball rolling on this one? This will probably be a good discussion at a town meeting, since we didn't assign it to anyone. Arthur, you're kind of, do you mind doing this one, Arthur? You're kind of.
Yeah, I thought I was finished. I thought I crossed the finish line, but yes,
Yes.
I'll write it up. I'll write it up since
All
I
right.
just was opining about it, so I guess I
You were too
made my own bed, now I gotta lay it out.
Firm in
You know,
your,
you know the
teacher's
first person
yeah.
that's gonna stand up after you finish
Bob? Pat'll beat Bob to the microphone.
Yes.
Go, Pat, go.
It's not something,
You know,
it's gotta
Alright.
be something I care
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
before
I will make
get
sure
up on
and
the
mention
We have,
the minority opinion.
We got 2 more things to do, and then we'll be complete for the evening. So we have a reserve fund request, and it's really, our only one that we've done so far this year is the 2,500. Remember there was a grant, but we had to match half the money. So we had done the first half, 2,500, back in the late fall. And now we've got the second half for the rest of the year, so it's another 2,500. So I'll take a motion to approve or disapprove, or.
Move to approve.
Seconded.
All right. Any further discussion?
Remind me what the money
This
is
is,
being spent on?
it's, oh God, which group is it? I want to say,
Somebody's got some kind
it's
of
a
nice
energy,
note paper.
it's a grant that we've gotten, but in order to get the grant, I think it's related to in the building energy. But anyway, we've got someone who we can have come in, and what was his, because now I forget, facilities, land use. So we have, it's, someone's come, oh, now I remember. We have someone who will come in and do like a kind of a energy analysis for us, and we
Right.
got half of it paid with a grant.
Right.
But we had to fund the other half, and Ray didn't have any other money in his budget. And so in order to get the grant money, we agreed to use some of our reserve fund.
Mhm.
So, so it was 2,500 in the fall and 2,500 in the spring for our total piece. And then we get it, and we're getting, you know, obviously someone that they're spending 10,000 on the actual project. So, all right. Any other? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right. And then, speaking, I don't know if you noticed, remember we had discussed at an earlier meeting as we were going through the budgets, I did agree that we'd take our reserve fund back down to 25,000. That was part of us getting back to a balanced budget. Because the last few years, I mean, I think we've been spending 5 or 10.
Right.
And years ago, what did we, it was either 15 or 25. I can't remember what
I
our
think it's
reserve.
25 forever, that's just my recollection.
Yeah, and then we moved it up to 50 when, you know, when the
was-
times
it
were
felt like-
tight, and
yeah.
we had really pinched everyone's budgets down such that there was some concern we'd have some overages, and we made it through that time period fairly well, and we've kept the 50 in. So anyway, so we're gonna go back to 25 for the coming year.
I mean, we're really just free cash.
Exactly, by default. I mean,
Right.
look at this year, we've got 50 in the budget, this will be 5. I think we still might see the graffiti repair, remember the recreation
the 10
department?
grand,
That's like
correct.
9 or 10 grand.
Yeah.
So we haven't seen that yet. I think Jack was waiting to see how everything came out.
Mm.
Who knows, I mean, you could just do it through transfer, and this will fall into free cash, so we'll see whether we get a request before the end of the year or not on that one.
I mean, we do have our own expenses for the mailings. and that
Yes,
kind
we
of
have a
stuff,
separate
so we
budget
have-
for that, yes.
Oh, that's not?
Yeah, that's not part of the reserve fund. The
Oh,
reserve fund
I
is
thought-
strictly.
Oh, that's right, we got our own like $3,500.
Yes.
Yeah, we got our
own.
That's right,
Yes.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, no, this one's,
Mail out the warrant.
no, the mailing, Arlie, he was,
Okay,
that one's
okay,
like,
sorry.
whatever it is, 3 or 5 grand, yeah. No, this one's, it's only
Yeah, no,
departments
you're
come
absolutely
forward,
right. I
yeah,
forgot
yeah,
about that.
yeah. Alrighty, alright, last thing, 2 minutes that I had sent around. You know,
We're really
Motion approved?
Oh,
Seconded.
well written.
Before we end, I just want to say thank you guys for changing on that turf field thing, because that is such a delicate process, as you saw, that the slightest little bump is going to derail it. And, you know, it may yet get derailed in a different town, but I'm just happy that Norfolk is not
Not
the
us.
ones that derailed it, so.
I appreciate all the effort that everyone
Appreciate
put
the,
into it. So.
I appreciate the change of heart on that one, because that was, you know, it's just not going to happen unless everything comes together.
Alright. Alright, we got a motion to approve our 2 minutes
Second.
and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Alright. Alright, that is it. We have completed everything. Our next meeting will be, when it's 6, I think, 6 o'clock
meeting.
before town meeting. We'll meet and do the couple of articles we've got left. And
Just
any other
transfers
loose
and,
ends. Transfer, the only thing I believe we have left, transfers, Article 3, Article 7, the sewer division, and that is it. Unless and then I'll confirm with Jack on Article 9, the ambulance, the
Right.
lease versus debt nature. I mean, we've approved as is. If there's something that changes in the interim, you know, we can rediscuss that night, but.
Right.
I mean, and ultimately, if we approve it and they don't borrow, then
Exactly.
Who
No,
cares?
Not a big deal. Okay,
Do we need to?
Yes.
Is there a motion around the turf thing?
What do you mean?
there will be, yes.
Right, I'm just wondering how the contingent character is handled.
Ah, I believe similar to, like, even the article, it's kind of, I believe, it's, if all three towns don't approve, it just dies on its own.
Well,
Are
there
you
are
thinking
lots of different
potentially not?
ways you could
Yes.
write it, right? I mean, you could say, I was thinking about, you could say Norfolk will only borrow the money if its,
If all
if its
three-
amounts will get you to the $1 million,
Right.
which would ease the constraint around the other towns. I just wondered, right, I mean,
Well, we brought that up.
they are all
that
contingent.
They have
Yeah.
to, it has to be, that's what I was, concerned about, that we
Right.
don't borrow the money unless all the.
oh yeah,
the
agreed completely,
towns,
but I just wonder what's the contingent rules? I mean, they're not gonna mention, are we gonna? I
Those
would
are exchange
recommend.
emails. I mean, you're right, the article says nothing about the contingent nature of it, and whether we need to or not, I don't know either.
Yeah.
Need to.
I will find that out
Put a
before we
contingency
get to
in
the
article
motions,
that says
Arlie.
subject to the approval by the other towns or
Right.
something
But
like
I'm
that.
just saying that.
You're thinking if there's no contingency, we're committed no matter what?
Yeah, I mean, if there's no contingency, I frankly ask to reconsider this, because we're not gonna borrow the money
Right.
on an open
Yes.
end, so there's
No.
gotta be
Right.
contingency.
Well,
My-
I would
my-
say, I think our understanding is it's an all three towns either approve it or it dies.
That's right.
I understand, but
Yes.
I'm not sure that's what we want to do, because you could equally well make it contingent on however $850,000 got into the turf.
Right, so what you're
committee
saying
fund.
is, Right.
Our funding would be contingent, we would only borrow if our money would get to the $1 million.
right, that's what you're saying. By hook or by crook, we're not gonna specify how
Which-
they do it.
right,
A
it-
private donor could show up and suddenly write the difference, and we should still give them the money.
No,
Up
see,
to,
there, no, I think it's the three towns share in their proportional interest. That's the contingency.
But
If
if
two
one-
towns
I
vote for it
understand
and
why-
one doesn't,
Right, but I don't understand why we'd want to do that. Since I haven't seen the language, I'm just raising, I mean, may not be
The
appropriate for
language is
discussion now.
just our article, which
Yeah.
doesn't have a contingency.
But then we can't,
So I think Arlie's
You
point is,
can't do
shouldn't there
that.
be some contingency there?
Well,
you
I,
can't,
see,
that's
I'm
not
thinking,
what the intent is.
right, but I'm just thinking the article is by its nature contingent.
The article is, it's a motion that the town votes on.
yeah.
So the article is, the words may be in a motion, and typically they're very similar, but you have to have a motion.
Yeah.
And,
And the motion is to approve the borrowing of that amount of money.
but
Just
that I
like
would
we've-
not support.
Approve the borrowing of the ambulance.
No, this is, the
Now, which part's
language
your-
here is very clear. And,
Yeah,
I
which
mean,
part's your concern here, Arlie, that only one town approves it? Or what's your, which?
Two layers of concerns.
Two
to be-
layers
To
of
be
concerns.
precise about
Okay.
it. One is, I think we all agreed that we have to have contingent language that only borrows if the money will be spent, it
I
will
would agree.
immediately be spent.
Yes, I would agree.
That was the understanding.
to that.
Right.
We talked
So
about
there
that.
has to be language that describes that
Wait,
contingency.
say that again, Arlie? That it's,
That we're not going to borrow 150 and put it
200.
into, or two, excuse me, thank
200
you.
Okay, we're gonna put,
Don't
we
get
borrow
that-
200,
yeah,
we
yeah,
put it
yeah.
into a fund,
Yeah, that-
and the project doesn't happen.
Exactly.
That's your concern?
Yes.
Ah,
Right.
gotcha.
Well, first one.
Okay.
So
That's
so
it. All right,
that's
so
number
that's
one.
one
So
concern.
we have to have contingent language that means that we'll only borrow if,
If the project's
It goes
going
forward,
forward. Gotcha, okay.
right, so point
And
number one.
that is absolutely a constraint, yes.
Right, and so has to be a motion written that has that kind of character to it.
Okay.
So that's point number one. Point number two is that we have a choice about what is the nature of the contingency. We could, for example, say that requires that Rentham and Plainville also commit to 200,000.
Well, it's different, because the ratios are, like ours is technically 34.28.
All the more
each-
reason to write it broadly.
Yeah. Because each town, again, it's proportionate to the
Yeah, it won't be
population.
That's why I was saying we
Yeah.
we don't know the
close.
amount yet until we're
Yeah.
told what the amount is. But yeah, it's
It might be
pro rata.
205.
It's pro rata, just like the school budget, it's pro rata.
But doesn't that serve where I think you're going is just to say that this money will be spent if the project goes forward and if total funding is achieved, period.
Well, your first one only goes forward if total funding is achieved.
Right.
Am I misunderstanding your other
Yes.
concern?
Yeah, I think unless we have language of the motion, what was clear to apparently everyone else around the table is certainly not clear to me.
Okay.
The motion has to have language that makes the borrowing contingent on the project going forward.
Okay, agreed.
So that's not what's in the article,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I'm saying that since my sense is the town, at least as represented by the 5 people around this table, has a deep enthusiasm for this project, then we would, I think in our interest, craft the contingency without a reference to the other towns. So if somehow $850,000 was in the pot, that we would want to step in for our 102, sorry, if
Oh.
800 was in the pot.
Yeah,
I was,
Thank you.
I wasn't going down
I
that
agree.
path at all. That's interesting.
I'm
though.
fine with that.
I viewed this as the 3 towns are joining together and going to, and that's what we're voting on.
I don't even
So-
know if we could do that, could we?
Yeah.
I guess-
Yeah, why not?
I guess
Here's
we could.
200K, go with
I guess you're
God.
right.
I don't,
I mean, however you get there.
No, I understand what you're saying, Arlie. Okay, that's a different.
How about Arlie
interesting-
writes it? Just write the motion.
oh no, I know who's gonna write the motion. And I'm staring at him right now.
Okay.
It better be well-crafted, because it's.
But
you-
that's an interesting point. I mean, if 400,000 shows up from somewhere else.
Yes, now you're.
Do we really care?
Plainville
got it.
backs out and Rentham backs out, leaving Norfolk to pick up the tab.
I think the sense of the
want
discussion around here was that we want to back off
Well, we'll charge
Well, I
system
don't
to
know.
the other
KP's
towns.
No.
commitment, but would we therefore back off on an equal commitment from the rest of the towns? I mean, aren't we,
See, that's always to me been part of the game.
Yes.
I mean, it's an interesting
an all or
point you
no-
raise,
yeah.
and I'm not sure I disagree with you, but I'm not so sure that, if the other towns wimp out, why should Norfolk pick up the tab?
Is that what you're considering? That we
Yeah,
would
that's
pay for
what
the whole
Arlie was
thing?
saying.
Yeah.
If
Oh.
there was,
If
if
we
our
like
money
this
got us
project-
over the hump, regardless of how they got the
Right.
money into the,
if there's
into the pot.
$800,000 in the pot and Norfolk can step up and make it happen, would we?
Kick in another 200,000?
No,
Just the
our
200.
Our
Okay.
two, yeah.
Well,
Just our
yeah, well,
200,
that's
not
our-
another.
Okay, but that's.
Would we kick in 200
Right.
if the other towns kicked in nothing?
What if there's
That's what
750 in the
Arlie's
pot?
asking.
If, again, this requires some crafting of the language, if it's
But
done
that's not
correctly,
realistic, Pat.
it
You've
will
been on
not
the
No, I
move
know.
committee,
forward.
and you've
Right.
figured out that there's really no other money out there.
Right.
So that's not
Yeah,
really a
it's
realistic.
not a-
True.
it's
I mean,
not a real.
The odds against that happening are about 1 billion to 1.
So you'd have to come up with
That's
some,
absolutely right. Yeah.
former graduate, the Sterling Trust or something,
There we go.
decides to dump a $500,000 into it, then.
Between now and July.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
they haven't done it for the last 4 years. But, no, Arlie, I would say that the contingency is the 3 towns have to do their slice of the pie.
Right.
because we
Okay,
share everything
that's-
else.
That's.
Yes.
It would be like we're gonna now kick in more money out of the goodness of our heart because, just for educational budget,
Right.
we wouldn't do that.
Yeah. No.
I think what we would do is we would remove ourselves from KP, get Dave going, and have our own high school. There we go again.
Not for 200 grand, we
I
wouldn't.
just-
No,
My question was, and I guess it's a good question, who's gonna write the motion, and it would be a good idea to actually see the motion sometime before town meeting, I guess.
Right.
And, if the contingency, given the lack of specificity in the discussion, I don't see any reason why a contingency can't be fairly wide open. I certainly don't have any feeling that we need to be 34.26% of it, or whatever the motion. We need to be a total of 600,000. That was the only thing I heard.
Interesting.
And
Oh,
I don't,
Okay.
I'm not,
All right.
but if your
No,
guys'
no, no,
sense is
no.
that it was really 34.26.
Yeah, well, it was more, I mean, I'm
Well,
just
it
using that
has
because
been,
that's our
from
current.
From the beginning, the
The
understanding
discussions
has
have
been
all
that
revolved.
operation- There's even a sense that that's a requirement, although I don't necessarily know why that would be, but it's to be allocated on the
Fairly.
basis of students, just the way our share of the KP budget is allocated.
Right.
That's the
Okay,
intent.
if that's the intent, then that's relatively easy to capture. I just don't know why, having worked this hard to bring it up, you would constrain yourself in that fashion, unless you felt it was necessary in order to get approval, that it might be
It's
too
just,
wide open.
it's just the guidelines that the three towns
Have
Have
always
been
used.
working with.
have been working under for all this time.
Is your sense that Norfolk approves this, that the other towns will likely approve it, or do you think that there really is some stumbling blocks? And we don't have to mention names, but
No.
could there be?
Why do we
That's
always
all
go
right.
first?
Well, because our town
Our
meetings.
town meeting's first.
Oh, that's right.
Well-
Weren't we gonna change that? Wasn't
But I don't
there-
think that makes, I don't think that's really why. I think we tend to be, more supportive anyway.
I
mean,
have
think
that impression.
I think the other towns come in, but I think we've always been pretty
That's
supportive.
why I have assured the committee all along that I thought this would be a no-brainer.
You should have been here
Yeah,
last
next
week.
Taking us for
better show
granted,
up.
Pat.
And I was like,
No.
ooh, I had to face the potential that we were the ones to derail it. That was really gonna be embarrassing.
I can see how we fill all the seats tonight, yeah.
But no, Arlie, I mean, the thinking has been, and I don't think anybody's really even thought to ask the question. It's just been that
See
the amount would be divided among the towns, just like the school expenses divided among the towns. And that we would either.
And that would be the expectation of the other towns as well,
Yes.
so.
Well, I mean,
Yes.
it already is,
Right.
because
So-
this is,
Right.
we're talking about history that goes back, not a year, but 6 or 8 months, this has been under discussion.
So the town of Norfolk's portion of cost
Right.
is clear to everybody.
Is the implication being that it would be proportioned based on enrollment like
Everything else.
like everything else is?
We picked a number
You know,
as a
you have to
committee.
ask,
No, I agree with you, Arlie. I think technically it doesn't have to be. You could probably craft arguments on why it doesn't have to be if that was a road you wanted to go down, but
Yeah.
I don't think that's what anyone's proposing.
I don't think we want to get locked into having to do that if the other towns don't do it. So
Right.
you're saying the only contingency you want is does our money push it over the top?
The project goes
yeah,
forward.
that was exactly how that's how I.
Interesting. No, that's an interesting view,
And that's-
Arlie.
I'm with
okay, and
Arlie.
I think that's good
I'm
enough,
with
because the
Arlie.
reality is, for that to happen, the
The
other
other
two
two
towns are
towns
gonna have
have
to
to
do
come
their
in,
slice.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the same
That I
contingency.
think is
It's the same.
absolutely
Right.
the
It's the-
likely scenario, but
it's the
I
same
think it
But
may
you're
not.
you're taking casting a wider net here, just in case other
Yeah.
things could occur.
Yeah.
Yes, no,
I-
that's.
Backing
That's
us
why
away.
you always think these through, Arlie. You
If
never know
we're,
what
If we're happy
could.
with that as the contingency,
I
then
don't like that. I
think
wrote it
that's
up.
the way to make it.
Sorry,
Having thoroughly discussed the motion, I had one other question.
but
Go ahead.
actually, before I
ahead.
leave, I think it may be worth checking with Jay
Yes.
about the contingent aspect of it, because is that an appropriate
Right,
broadening
Yes.
of the article?
and it may be, yeah.
Because there's nothing, in fact, the article doesn't call for any contingency, although all of our discussion has been clear on that.
I wasn't worried too much. We did exchange emails on that point, the contingent, at least as I understood your question. I think to some extent, you look at all of our articles, like the ambulance one, right? We just approved it, and maybe it'll be leased. So maybe that borrowing won't happen. But we've approved the borrowing. There's a contingency, but we haven't written
Wouldn't
the
we have to
contingency.
reconsider our motion on like the ambulance to make that happen? Because it would then come out of our operating budget?
Yeah,
So I
this
think
No, if you don't
contingency is
borrow it,
different.
then, it'll eventually,
Any borrowing is contingent upon the events requiring the borrowing happen, is one way to look at it. Whether it's good enough, who knows?
But we control all of the ambulance events, right? I mean, that's within the town's control. This is.
There's less risk.
This, again, just playing devil's advocate for the moment, as the article is written, not as we discussed around the table with regard to the motion, there is no contingency around the borrowing. And so my only point is, we should make sure the moderator will allow a broader motion than the language of the article. I suspect he would, but I can't speak for him.
But likewise, but my point, Archie, is the ambulance article has no contingency around the borrowing either, just like the.
Yeah, but I think it's completely different. The ambulance we control, if we don't spend the money, things change. In this
It's not a
case, the
joint effort.
contingency is that someone else doesn't come to the table. And then if we act according to the language of the article, we must borrow the money and put it into the
Well,
fund.
Why must
We don't
If the-
we
if
don't
the
borrow
project
money
doesn't go
unless,
forward?
like Main Street was supposed to be redone last year. We authorized the borrowing for redoing Main Street from Seacock Street up to the Old Town Hall. We didn't do the project, nobody borrowed the money.
Fair enough. So it may well be that this is a completely routine character. My sense is the contingency is that the other towns don't step up, and that's a different contingency than us deciding not to go ahead with the
No, I agree,
project.
I agree.
But
Yeah.
maybe it's all moot. Maybe it's
Yeah,
understood.
but
in
I
the-
But I think it's, I'll follow up and get a
Yeah.
clarification either with Jack and town council or
Right.
with Jay, so.
Right, I think, yeah, so anyway,
Yeah.
we need to
Yeah.
see the,
It just seems to me it's pretty clear that if the event that requires the borrowing doesn't happen, then the borrowing doesn't happen. It's a pretty well-established tradition.
I mean, if they
Yeah.
But
did,
if-
let's
Yeah,
say
but
they
the-
did, let's say the project didn't go forward and they borrowed the money, they'd have a tough time coming back here next year,
Right,
you know? There's consequences to that.
right, it's,
right, no, I think it would be a foolish thing to do.
Right.
But I think we should, I mean, I think if I were sitting in the audience in the town meeting, I want to make sure that we weren't
Right.
voting for anything that might commit
Yeah.
the town to borrowing money for a purpose that was
yeah.
not.
I'm actually,
fulfilled.
we're having the pre-town organizational meeting tomorrow morning.
Right.
So I will,
Yeah.
I'll bring it up with Jay and Jack and see what,
Good.
I mean,
see
And
if
since
they,
Right, 'cause
this is going to
we don't
be-
know really.
yeah.
The committee is doing this project, is it gonna be
Oh, yeah.
a
who's
town
gonna-
project, or there's a committee gonna actually hire and?
No, it's the school.
The schools are gonna,
All of this money's going into the school, into a school account.
Don't say
All
operating
the
budget.
money that's been,
where's the 400,000? Well, let's say maybe you've got 200,000 actually in cash, so where's that money sitting now?
that's in the turf field account at
Okay,
KP.
the school controls.
The school has that money.
And that's where this money-
It's in the turf field
Assuming
account.
all the towns go along with this, our monies
Money will
will
go
all go
there.
into that same account.
It's a school
And it'll be
project.
their project, and they'll
Yes.
bid it just like,
They gotta bid it. In fact, they are bidding it.
right, you just said they're actually going to bid tomorrow,
Yeah.
opening bid tomorrow?
I didn't understand, I mean, there was a lot of concern, deep concern, and a lot of motivation emanating from the perception that if this money is spent, that means that we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, that, you know, educational quality will suffer, the operating budget is gonna be impacted. I didn't.
The reality is the operating budget will be impacted because there'll be about $85,000 of savings.
I know it'll make it better, I know, but,
So that whole line of discussion.
well, but so do they have, so, but I wanna correctly understand, is the only way that King Philip can put forth a, infrastructure-related capital project
Yeah, I was wondering the
that
same
will
thing.
even save the money in the future, is for us to have a warrant article? That's the only way? Am I understanding
I
that?
believe
To a large
that's
extent, there wouldn't be
correct.
any other funds. I mean,
Okay, I
They
mean,
can't spend.
that's my takeaway
Well, I don't
from
think
it.
they can borrow without our approval,
Right,
and they
that is
certainly can't
correct.
spend E&D without our approval.
right,
It
right.
just, I mean, I can
I think it's more of a
But they could
perception
do it,
problem for them.
except
that
for
if
the
they
last 3
spend
years, you
money-
mean.
Yeah,
Right,
Well-
right, but
A perception
that's,
problem.
for some reason that
Right, that's-
changed, but
right,
now
right.
that is the
Now-
way it is.
You know, the current operating
If
mantra
they
is
spend
that.
money
Right.
on
Yeah.
this project instead of on
Right.
classroom teachers, then there's a perception problem that,
right.
you know, that they don't wanna have to deal with, you know, and I understand that.
Oh, I do
It's a-
too, and
it's a-
the reality is, I don't think it's going to, it's not gonna rob Peter to pay Paul,
No.
but it's just, I believe that the school had some ability to then float capital projects that would be clearly, you know, neutral or even saving them money in terms of, you know, infrastructure stuff, but that
Right,
doesn't seem to be
right.
the case, which is, okay.
No,
Well,
not
I mean,
really.
one thing that we have not talked about at all is replacements for the turf field when the time comes.
Yeah, all these things have a life.
They say 10 years, but realistically, these fields are lasting 12, 14 years.
That's
And it's
short.
not a complete rehab, you don't have to do the whole,
Right,
you
you
just
don't
have to
do
replace the
things. So
rug.
it's like a $600,000 project.
Right.
The fields are getting cheaper, maybe 10 years from now it'll be $500,000. But that's gonna have to be dealt with at some
Right.
point. The logical way to do that point
Set aside money
is
every
to
year.
borrow and use the savings, because the savings is gonna generate about 70 grand a year. So over the life expectancy of the field, it pays for itself.
Mhm.
Now, we'll kickstart it, but 12 years from now, they're gonna be looking at replacement issues. And to me, the logical way to deal with that at that point would be borrow.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
given their constraint, I mean, if if the mechanism for capital is coming to warrant articles, I mean, I'm trying to think of how to say this in the most respectful way. What incentive do they have to have any capital operating mechanism whatsoever when it's just coming to town meetings?
Because what they come to town meeting for in that certain situation is the ability to borrow and repay from their own revenues. The revenues that they already get from us, not necessarily an increase.
I'm not following. So if their boiler breaks and requires a complete replacement or whatever, some piece of infrastructure.
Then they're either gonna get us from the towns or they're not gonna get it at all.
Yeah,
The turf field is different because the turf field is generating about $75,000. Actually, estimate is about between revenues and decreased expenses, about $85,000 a year.
why would it, I mean,
Benefit
I understand
to
it's gonna
everybody.
reduce their maintenance costs, but why would it create revenues?
Because you can rent those fields.
Yeah.
The latest possibility for a school event is, I think, 9 o'clock at night. There are like soccer teams and whatever that do practices and have games after that hour, and they'll pay $200
Hmm.
to use a school field.
That'd be
So
great if they could make it self-sustaining,
They'll
obviously.
be, so, I mean, it truly is,
They set up a
on an
revolving
ongoing basis, self-sustaining.
Right.
along with,
But
In that
you
case,
gotta
it's
get
great
over-
that capital asset has that capability,
You've
which
gotta
is
get,
fantastic.
you've gotta get over that initial hurdle, that's the
Right.
thing. We've
Right.
gotta get this first hurdle, and then from then on, it's pure benefit.
Well, in this case, I understand, I'm just considering the implications of capital going forward. I mean, how does that get, who's watching that store? I don't,
Nobody's gonna watch that story, I mean, that's the reality.
Harley, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It's 70 grand out of a
We
30
know
million.
how
Oh,
it's
not that
done.
one, he's
Nobody's
on
gonna
the,
watch.
a bigger thing.
Is the due process is set up with this town meeting, presuming
Right.
our recommendation passes, is that responsibility goes to the town administrator and the selectmen.
Yeah, yeah, again, I'm past this field, just, I mean, great thing, I'm glad it passed, voted for it, but other capital things, just, this revealed to me how they need to approach large ticket capital spending items, even ones that aren't gonna have revenue. So I'm just like, whoa, I didn't realize that's the way that was handled.
Yes.
See, and this is where I have the we, they.
Oh, I was like, welcome to the party.
Right, but,
This,
yeah.
this
Yeah.
we, they thing still continues to bug me. If our elementary schools have a boiler problem, the town's gonna pay for it. End of discussion. Now, if our high school, the KP high school happens, all of a sudden we have these protracted discussions about, are you gonna pay for it or are we gonna pay for it?
But that's the law, that's the way it's
You
set
as-
up.
well,
The way it's set up, we have
That's
to.
the way you have to do regional, but what it does is it creates this detachment mentality, which I think we need to get by. It's our goddamn high school, you know?
But you
It's
could
as
draw
much
that-
our
you
high
could take
school as
that-
our elementary school.
Keep following that down the road, and you could end up with one town or two towns paying everything for the third town.
No, you can't do that because it's established by law what the proration is. for the
But that's
expenses.
why we always look at it like it has to be a shared expense. We have to have contribution from the other two towns, or it doesn't work. And it's, you know, I don't know how you ever, when you have a regional school, how are you ever gonna get away from that? You can't.
I also think, Pat, something that's different is like, let's talk about the water division, right? So you have revenues over time, and people are saying, hey, you know, we're building up revenues, now we're gonna build a new well. They're building, I mean, they're actually actively manage something to try to flatten out the expenditures over time, so it's not all of a sudden you're in crisis. And I can appreciate how maybe one boiler for one building might be a crisis, but if you add up all the capital requirements of an entire school system, it's like, should we be putting money, I mean, is there, you know, it just, I'm wondering how that's being managed.
If we had
Jack
our-
manages that.
If we had our own high school, we would treat them like the elementary school.
Yeah,
Because
there's
we're
no-
regional,
There's
why
no
do we
funds
treat
being
them
set
any
aside in the
Dave doesn't
elementary
like
schools.
So we go regional. We go regional with the idea of saving money, right?
And having centralized management of certain things that I
And
thought
then yet
included
all of a
capital.
sudden now they're an alien species
No, no, no,
out
no,
there
just,
that we.
I thought they were
that we
managing
wanna,
certain, not
you
that
know-
they're aliens, but that they're managing certain things.
Yeah, they are.
I thought capital was more part of that equation, that's all. You know, I don't look
They
to,
only have a capital budget if we give them a capital
Right.
budget. And that has never, to my knowledge, been part of anybody's discussion.
But in the town's perspective, municipal side, it's free cash that gets certified, and a portion of that always gets kind of set aside for capital. What mechanism is that? What mechanism is there for the schools? Is there no mechanism? Is it just the same capital all the time? The municipal side is the capital for all entities?
Yes.
And I think it is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
It is,
and
yeah.
in the past, the towns.
So what is the E&D account for, whatever they want to?
E&D is, he said it's like our stabilization fund, but
Yeah,
a
that's what I
pretty-
mean, why?
That's a vote away between being one or the other, it's really
Right.
free cash.
It's free cash.
Call it
To
what
me,
you
it's
want.
free cash. So why would they have a separate free cash? Towns, why can't that be shared with all three towns? I just don't, I don't get it.
Share, what does that mean, shared? When you
Meaning
say-
that.
Well, it's not, that's seven,
Once it's
whatever it was.
common
890,000
expenses.
No, once the
wasn't
year
ours.
is,
It
once
was
the year is
the
done.
three towns.
the-
Oh, right.
Once the
We're
year
all
is
back.
down, the school
Right.
puts back anything else, and then if there is an emergency, if you wanna go more to a we and not an us versus them, you would have to follow more of that approach.
You have to
where-
combine more things into, so it's not a municipal and a school, it's more of a combined. And the easiest one to do is capital, because it's, because it is something that we do share.
Yeah, because
Well,
ultimately, I
we
mean,
can, we can debate these for hours, so.
Yeah, because we can't get the other two towns to,
is it a good process,
Yeah. Right.
how do you change it to make it a better one?
Yeah.
Too
Topic for our
difficult.
next meeting?
Topic for our
I
next
move to
one.
adjourn.
Seconded.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
We are done.